Linda Rhodes, I was so excited to be introduced to you by Dr. Doug Mader, my co-host on Exotic Pets. I thought, oh, great, a woman veterinarian. I love you all. It turns out you were writing a memoir, which has now been published, and the memoir is astounding. It's called Breaking the Barnyard Barrier. A woman veterinarian paves the way. And I thought, oh, okay, she's in the barnyard, so she isn't doing small animals. It'll be like James Herriot Tales in the Barnyard. Oh no, this is a real socio-political view of what it was like to be a pioneering female vet. Not just female vet, bad enough, if you will, but one who wanted to work with large animals, particularly cows. Linda, you show no bitterness in this book, and this is going to be a strange analogy I'm going to make. But when we read Primo Levi, who lived through the Holocaust and wrote some of the books that mean the most to me, and I think other people who have read Holocaust literature, fiction, nonfiction, feel the same way. His books had no bitterness and no anger, and that was the elevating aspect of them. And this book of yours could have so much bitterness and anger and resentment, and you don't show any.
Mm.
At the way you were treated, at the way women were treated, but you in particular, as a lone woman saying, I want to be a cow doctor. Do you not feel those feelings? Because in reading the book, I was very moved to both laughter, but also worry for you at the time and anger and resentment on your behalf. Do you not feel any of that?
Oh, Tracy, thank you so much, one, for having me on, and two, for such a careful and thoughtful read of the book. It's a really interesting point. I have to say, I did not feel anger because I felt like these men that were getting in my way of actually wanting to practice and practicing, they were part of the culture. This was a very
Yes.
bigger story. This was
Yeah.
not just little me trying to convince Ron that I could do the job.
Right.
This was a bigger story of trying to think about changing a culture. And I was embedded in this dairy cow culture, which was very male dominated. And anger just wasn't going to change it. The only thing that was going to change it was me showing up with a smile on my face and taking good care of their cows. And I knew that in an intuitive way. So I think, and plus, who wants to be angry all the time?
No, nobody, but you were a young woman. You were highly educated at fancy veterinary colleges. You had every reason to believe that wanting to go take care of dairy cows was an honorable part of being a veterinarian. You weren't interested in rabbits and cats. That just wasn't what lit your fire, if you will. And the pushback you got, yes, it was a culture, but my God, I think it's very important for women veterinarians today who dominate the field of veterinary medicine. There are more of them than men, and it's quite normal. In fact, you expect to see women veterinarians in a clinic or in an emergency setting. But when you went out to get a job after University of Pennsylvania, after Cornell, they're like, you went where? What? You want to do what? You were simply tossed aside. Hey, little girl, go bake cookies and make babies and be pregnant and barefoot. It doesn't seem that long ago, but
Yeah.
you were rejected and rebuffed, and you drove enormous distances, and you went all the way to Utah, and you went all the way to northern from New York. It was bitter and cold, and they put you in untenable situations, one veterinarian after another, just treating you like basically trash. I'm
Yeah.
it's but the way you tell the story isn't indignation. It isn't anger. In fact, it was a different time, wasn't it? You even were living for a little while on a commune, which
Yeah,
was a
that's right.
charming counterpoint to the fact that you were this highly educated, skilled, and very brave practitioner of medicine. So you had two sides of your personality.
Yeah, yeah, I did. I started out, people ask me, why did you want to take care of cows? I grew up in a suburb. We had cats growing up. I didn't have anything to do with dairy cows, or I had a fantasy that someday I would ride a horse. I was like, I saw Dale Evans riding Buttercup, and I was
Eddie
just like,
Oakley, I
no,
feel
I
you.
want to be like that. But I
Yes.
really had no connection with large animals. And but after I graduated from Sarah Lawrence, I went out west. My sister was living on a goat farm. And I volunteered to work there for room and board. And I found that I really enjoyed the work with the animals. I learned how to run a chainsaw. I learned how to build a fence and dig a fence post. But the real work that I enjoyed was with the animals. And I learned to milk goats, and I just fell in love with the goats. They were just so charming and fun. And I learned how to make yogurt and butter and bake bread and a wood stove and all that hippie stuff.
It sounded fun.
It was very fun. But the thing is, I was dead broke because I was
Yes.
working for room and board. And I knew that at some point I had to figure out a way to make some money. And I had grown up in a household that my dad was a scientist and I had a science brain. Undergrad, I took a lot of math and physics and chemistry. And so I woke up one day and thought it would be a great thing to be a veterinarian. I could use the science part of my brain, and I could also be with the animals in the barn, and I wouldn't have to sit all day behind a desk. I could use my muscles. I could be physical, which I really enjoyed. And it just seemed like a natural. And nobody told me it was hard to get into vet school. I had no idea that it was hard to get into vet school. I just said, okay, I'll just be a vet. And that was the start of the journey.
I would say then you were raised as a female who was told there were no limits to what you could do. Just be
Yes.
yourself, follow your dreams. There are many women who were raised that way, both then and now. And it's a great gift, but a little bit of a reality check would have been helpful. If someone had said to you, this is going to be really harsh, you're going to be tested like it's hazing. It's almost like you were hazed. And then when you were finally taken in as a vet, in Utah. It was only like, ugh, only because the guy we lost him and there's nobody. And I don't want to do emergency calls at night. It wasn't like, you know what, Linda, let's give you plucky girl a try. If you
No,
really
no.
want to wear a rubber sleeve up to your armpit and stick your arm up the arse of hundreds of cows a day on a farm, if that's what you want to do, no one said, have at it. You know what? Give it a try. And if you slip and fall, we'll lift you up. In fact, that story of the man who took you to deal with his bull and putting the ring in his nose, tell that story verbally just because it was so distressing. It was so obvious you were being not just set up to fail, but possibly even to be killed.
Yeah, to be hurt. Yeah. This, I had about a dozen job interviews in upstate New York. I wanted to live in upstate New York because one, it's the area I grew up in, but my husband wanted to live there because he was a musician and he
Yes,
played music with his brothers there. And so he really wanted to stay in the area. And I thought, how hard could it be? This is a big dairy area. There's
that's
lots of
right.
practices.
Yeah,
I'll get a job. I had a dozen job interviews, and this one was particularly memorable. An old vet, the only people that would really consider me were the vets that had really horrible practices that hardly
yeah,
made any money and were
yeah.
taking care of the worst dairies. And so he and I met up in the morning. I had my coveralls and my boots, and these were working job interviews. And we went out to a farm, and he handed me a ring, and he said, the first job is you've got to put a ring in that bull's nose over there. And I looked at the bull, and he was really big. He was much bigger than you normally would do a ring in his nose. He'd already grown up, and he was panting and drooling, and he had been restrained in this little shed since the farmers went out in their fields to do the spring planting, and he didn't like being in that shed. And the shed looked like it was something that was thrown up to take care of somebody's sheep or something.
For a day.
It was
Yeah, you
not
depicted
a
very
shed
well.
that was not a place that could really restrain a big dairy bull. And so Doc Sherman said, yeah, go, here's the ring, go put it in his nose. And I thought, oh my God, I don't think I should be doing this. This is crazy. But I also was on a job interview and I didn't feel like I could say no. So I went over and I did not climb in the shed with the bull. I threw some feed in the feed bunk and he put his head in and I put a rope around it and tied his head up. And he did not like that one bit. And I took the ring and
By
said,
the way, let me just interrupt. You had never put a ring in a bull's nose. You'd seen it done by your mentor
right,
on a much younger bull, much
exactly.
calmer, much less full of hormones,
Yeah,
and a
exactly.
different nasal passage
Yes, exactly.
because mature.
And so it's kind of like an ear piercing. It's just quick. It hurts, but it's supposed to be quick. And the ring has a little very sharp point on it that you push through the nose. So I tried to do that, and this bull was just too big, and his skin was too tough, and it just slid off and made a kind of a red scrape. And he went nuts, threw his head, ripped off a piece of the shed that he was tied to. So now he was throwing his head around with a rope halter on with a big piece of wood with kind of
Right.
splintered ends on either side. And he came after me, and I ran as fast as I could and jumped over the fence and didn't quite make it. My right leg, can't remember if it was my right or my left, but one of my legs he smashed into, and I fell over onto the other side of the fence and into the mud. And I was just like frantic. I was really, my heart was pounding. And the vet laughed at me.
Hmm.
He thought it was funny.
Yeah. I mean, I
And
read that chapter and or that anecdote, and it really did remind me of the running the bulls in Pamplona, where drunken young men taunt bulls who want to kill them. And as you explained, a vet working with dairy cows doesn't work with the bulls. The bulls
yeah,
need to
very
equalize,
rarely.
and they're vicious. And they
Yeah,
want
we should
no.
have been anesthetized,
Yes.
completely knocked out for that because
Yeah.
it was too much too big. You can put a ring in a young bull's nose, just like I was planning to, but not these big bulls. So he ran away with the halter and the piece of wood flapping around. He ran out into the pasture, and Doc Sherman and I drove home in silence. And I didn't get the job, obviously.
And your leg was killing you. And his comment was, if I recall, before he put you in the truck, he said, "How are you going to get the halter with all that wood off of that bull?" And I
Yeah.
thought, "Oh, please don't go." And then you got back to his house and he drove away. He didn't say, "I'm sorry." He didn't say,
Yeah.
"Tough luck, little girl."
Yeah.
And you were a girl, but he treated you like a little
But
girl.
nicely, his sweet
His
wife
wife gave you a
came
sandwich.
out and gave me a sandwich. Yes, she did.
Okay, but I still was pretty upset about it. I have to
Yes.
tell you, you're a good storyteller. Sarah Lawrence did you because I thought, how did she become such a good storyteller? And you are. You tell the story, you set the scene, you describe it. You do explain that the wives, known as the wife capital W, were one of the reasons you could not get hired.
Yeah.
Women didn't want a female next to their husband. And from what the little I could gather from the description of these men, these were not like hunky guys out of a Marlboro commercial. These were dumpy old guys that had been dairy vets for
And
30 years.
and plus, Tracy, you're in coveralls. You stink. You're of the
You
barn. You've got manure on your boots. I never wore any jewelry. My hair was covered with a kerchief. This was not a encounter where one would be flirting with me. That's for sure.
no, this would not, and yet it was treated as though you were a danger
Yeah.
to this.
And frankly, these guys had never really, most of them that I was interviewing with went to vet school 20, 30 years earlier.
Right.
And there were
No
even
females.
the women role models that I had when I went to school, they didn't even exist then.
That's right.
So they really had never seen a woman do this kind of work. And I would say to them, look, I don't understand what your problem is. I weigh 150 pounds. You weigh 250 pounds. The cow weighs 1,500 pounds. If she wants to lean against us and break our leg, you're not going to be able to push her away any better than I am.
But logic didn't come into it.
No.
And so the big question is, in reading the book, I think at some point, Linda's going to reveal to us why cows. Because when you were with those goats who were charming and you dealt with them having mastitis, and that was really interesting how you dealt with them having infected udders, I thought, can't you go back to the goats? Or was that enough of an industry to support you?
Yeah, there was not enough of an interest. I retained my interest in goats all through vet school. I became actually quite an expert on goat medicine. In my library back here, I have half a dozen books still
Oh,
on
nice.
goat medicine. And I did treat a number of goats, but you can't make a living as a
No,
veterinarian just taking care
no,
of goats. You have
no.
to dairies are big business,
Yes,
and they could afford to pay me. The people that had a few goats here and there, they didn't have much money. And I ended up donating a lot of my services to them because I love the goats, but the
yes.
owners couldn't afford me.
That totally makes sense to me. But okay, then why cows and not horses? Because the cow stuff you had to do was mostly pregnancy checks and then dramatic problems, which we'll talk about in a minute. That surgery you did on that cow was amazing that nobody thought should be done, and they even thought your diagnosis was wrong.
Yeah, the
But at
twisted
least with
stomach. Yeah.
horses, you're dealing with many other issues and not just sticking your rubberized arm up to the armpit,
Yeah.
up the bum, and to find out if this cow is pregnant and tell them exactly how pregnant she is because they have to be pregnant all the time.
The reason is the horse industry, the horse world is a whole world. And when I was at Penn really had a great expertise in equine.
That's
And
right.
they had the best equine surgeons in the world there. And they had pioneered a lot of really difficult orthopedic surgery on
That's right.
racehorses. But
That's
the
right.
horse world is a whole different world. The horse world is The vets that are good at it, they grew up with horses. They grew up on riding horses and competing in dressage,
I
and
see.
they could look at a horse and see if it was lame. And
I
I
see.
would look at a horse and think, what?
I
So
see.
it's a whole world, and that equestrian world, it's also a world of privilege and money
Yes,
because you can't have a horse if you're poor.
right.
And so it was just not a world that appealed to me. And I just love the practicality of the dairy world. Plus, cows are just really fun.
Are they really
They're
sweet?
smart, they are curious. I'll have to show you this. This just came out in Science magazine. This is a picture of a
Oh,
cow
yes.
that was
I
caught taking a broomstick and
yes.
using it to scratch her rear end. And they talk about her being the first cow that is ever shown to be shown to use a tool. I would have not been surprised by this. Cows are very smart, they're very curious, they're just wonderful animals. And so I always enjoyed working with them. You've probably seen some of those videos of a musician comes and sits down next to a pasture fence and starts playing the saxophone, and the cows
Yes.
come up over
Yes.
the pasture and they come down and they look at him and they're interested in listening. And
That's a great that's a great reminder. That is very iconic. That image of cows wanting to be near a human making music, and I'd
yeah,
forgotten about it. And the broomstick cow, who I think was in Austria or Switzerland, is reminiscent of Jane Goodall discovering that chimpanzees and other apes can
yeah,
use
exactly.
tools to get a job done. And
Yeah.
yeah, it did elevate, and it was a pet cow.
Yeah,
That
her name
cow,
was Veronika. She's
Veronica.
Austrian. She's
Yeah.
13 years old. And it says she uses a single tool for multiple purposes.
Yes. She uses it whether she's scratching her belly or her back.
Yeah,
I think it's hard for many of us to feel comfy with the humanization or the realization of I'll just call it the humanity of many different kinds
yeah,
of animals because we eat them. So
yeah.
it's just really hard. You can read Charlotte's Web and other books. There hasn't been there was one about Ferdinand the Bull, but that was baloney because there aren't any easygoing bulls. I mean,
Yeah,
the
I love
bulls,
that story. I read that story growing up. But the thing is that the dairymen also really care about their cows in a very special way
yeah,
because it's a cliche, but contented cows give more milk. And so the happier the cows are, the better bedding they have, the more gently they're handled, the more
right.
productive they are. And so the dairymen develop a style with their animals that is very gentle and
That's nice.
caring. And my dairymen all had names for their cows. If you look at the cow that's on the cover of my book, the black cow at the bottom,
Yes.
her name was Pinky. Yes, she
It's so
was.
it's the book is wonderful because of all the stories in it, but each of them, well, let's talk for a minute about that surgery. Because, and I just another idea I had when I was reading the book, besides the fact that now all of us who go to the veterinarian, or we're lucky enough if it's me to have friends who are veterinarians, we think of women vets as being more than equal, if there's such an idea, to men. Um, but I think of a TV show like Grey's Anatomy. My own veterinarian and I are rather hooked on it. We've watched it. She's watched it multiple times. And so many women surgeons. It's about young doctors learning to be surgeons. And so many of them are female in this series. And my own old dear friend in California, Karen Blanchard, was the first woman, and she's not that old now. She was my surgeon for a lot of female surgeries that I had to have in California. The first female ever invited to be a surgeon at Johns Hopkins. She's about maybe now 80 years old. There were no female surgeons,
Yeah,
and she was in a male dominated world where it was always under a microscope and
yeah,
waiting
everything
for
you
her to
did.
fix. And
Yeah.
that was what you lived with. Talk about the surgery on the cow who you found the ping, which these
Yeah.
farmers who had always fed this great alfalfa had never had a cow with a twisted gut. And you knew that's what it was. And this cow who was getting sicker by the day needed surgery, like
Yeah.
right away. So that was a big moment for you,
Yeah,
profession.
this was when I was still an intern at Utah State University, and the head of the dairy, the manager of the dairy, just couldn't believe that this cow had a twisted stomach. As you say, they said that's something that happens back east. You're a
Yeah.
vet from back east. That
Yeah. Yeah.
they feed silage back there. We feed great alfalfa. We never have twisted stomachs. We're just going to give her another Pepto-Bismol pill.
Right.
And so I got my boss, who was a very experienced large animal veterinarian who taught at Utah State, to come out to check her because I figured he would say, yes, Linda's right. She has a twisted
Right.
stomach. But he didn't.
That's
And one
right.
of the ways that you find out whether or not the stomach is twisted is you just whack your finger against the side of the cow and it makes this distinctive sound that you can hear with your stethoscope. It's called a ping. And it's because the stomach is full of gas and it's like whacking a beach ball. It makes a
Yes.
sound. And so ask him to examine the cow, and he did, but he never did that test.
Because
He
he
never
didn't
did
even
the
know to do it.
he didn't know to do it because in his world, cows
That's
didn't
right.
have twisted stomachs. And so I showed him, and it was so loud that I whacked that cow so loud that you could hear it without your stethoscope.
That's what you said in the book. Yeah.
And he still didn't believe me. But he said, "You know what, Dr. Rhodes, it's your call. You're the vet. If you think you'll cut her open and see, and if she has it, fine, you'll fix it. And if she doesn't have it, no problem." So it's not an emergency, but so I said, I'm going to come back this afternoon. They took the cow out into the grassy area in front of the barn and we clipped her up. And when I drove back to do the surgery with all my equipment, the cowboys had set up hay bales all around the cow like it was a theater. And they
Yes.
were all sitting there, like
It was
maybe
an
15
amphitheater.
cowboys. I don't remember
Yeah.
how many, but there was an audience. And
And
they
you'd
were like,
never
wait,
done the surgery before, Linda. You'd never done it. You'd only assisted or seen it.
again, yeah, this is going to be my first time actually doing it. But this is a pretty simple surgery. It's not a
Well, yeah.
complicated
To
surgery.
those of us reading your book, it's, oh, please don't let
Yeah.
anything go wrong. She's
Yeah,
up.
that's how I was feeling. It's, oh my God, now not only do I have to do the surgery, but I have to do it with an audience.
Yes,
And I was worried that what you know how it goes through your head. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe
of course.
you kind of doubt yourself a little bit. I cut her open and there was the twisted stomach, and she clearly had a twisted stomach. And to his credit, my boss said, "Wow, my heck, isn't that amazing? Gee, maybe that's because of this or because of that, and maybe we should be testing our other cows." And he got excited by it because it was
Thank
something
God.
new. The dairy manager just disappeared. He didn't want to admit that he was wrong. But I
And the other
sewed her up
cowboys
and
walked away. You didn't get a round of applause,
oh
but
no, they quietly disappeared.
yeah,
I
like,
was
oh,
finishing the surgery.
so knew something. In fact, you describe it really well about how deep you could cut, and if you cut too deeply, it'd be too deep, and that if this protrusion of pink stomach area came through, you were right, and if it didn't, you were wrong. It's like the book is full of these things of you were smart, you were knowledgeable, you cared about the animals,
Yeah,
and you were constantly being treated like an interloper, a know-nothing, a no good, useless.
yeah,
Yet you just kept on showing up for the cows. It was great. It is great.
yeah. You had. I think that the one of the important messages of the book is that persistence, and I think this is why the book is more universal than just people who are interested in veterinary medicine.
Right.
Is how do you do that? How do you just show up and
That's
keep
right.
showing up and keep believing that you can do it and not listening to the naysayers. And of course, you have moments where you doubt yourself and where you think maybe I made a mistake. You just get up and do it again and again. And by the end of that 2 years in Utah, I was a star. I was called the Lady
Nice.
Cow Vet
Yes, you were. And
because,
that's now your email, a part of your email name,
yes,
Lady
that's my
Cow Vet.
email address.
I mean,
But I,
it's
I
kind
was
of
called that
cool.
because I was unique in the state.
Yes.
And people would be at the 4-H shows where they had all their fancy cows, and I would hear them bragging to each other. I got that lady cow vet taking care of my cows because I was so
Yeah.
exclusive, right?
Yeah.
Because I couldn't take care
Yeah.
of everybody's cows.
That's right.
And at the very end, when I decided to leave for personal reasons, my marriage was falling apart, and that's all part of the book. But bless their hearts, they offered to set me up with a truck and all the medicines I
Yeah.
needed and give me the capital to start my own practice and to stay. And that was really a very touching moment.
Very.
And
It explains why bitterness and anger aren't there because you simply walked the walk and talked the talk and showed up.
yeah,
And I do think the book, it just from a feminist point of view, from the history of women in a field, especially in a medical field, absolutely fascinating. I'm so glad you took the time and the energy to remember it all, to put it down. It's called Breaking the Barnyard Barrier. A woman veterinarian paves the way. And you really did, Linda Rhodes. You did an incredible job. The stories are riveting, and I just say thank you on behalf of all the women who followed you to become veterinarians of many different animals. You really are a pioneer, and the book is marvelous. And thank you for writing it and for showing up for all the people who came after you.
Thank you for having me, Tracy. It's your close read of the book really means a lot to me. I really appreciate it.
It was a delight. I'm going to share it with my vet who did some of her work with reindeer in Alaska, one of whom gored her, or one of the
Oh my
animals
gosh.
gored her. So years ago. So she will love it, as will many other veterinarians. Thank you, Linda. Take
Thank you
care.
so much.